Dites-moi au nom quel pays effleura la belle romaine, archipel Taï, qui fut sa cousine germaine, et que parlant comme brillant mène dessus rivière ou sur étang, qui beauté eut trop plus qu'humaine, mais où sont les neiges d'antan, qui beauté eut trop plus qu'humaine, mais où sont les neiges d'antan? Sorry to inflict that on you, YouTube, but you can't imagine how difficult it is to find anything not in copyright to use as a short introduction to a video. In the end, I decided that I could use a piece of music with lyrics by a 13th century French poet called François Villon. 13th century should be out of copyright. Of course, the song was well known because Georges Brassens sang it, but he's got performance rights. Then I realised that although the lyrics were out of copyright and the performance copyright was mine, yes, I can proudly claim copyright on that brilliant performance, the music itself was written in the 60s, and even if the writer died there and then in the 60s, it will still be in copyright. Lifetime plus 70 years, remember. So what are PIPA and SOPA? Well, PIPA stands for the Protect IP Act, and SOPA stands for Stop Online Piracy Act. It's quite interesting that they have introduced a kind of two-pronged attack, which reminds me very much of what happened with the NDAA Act, which I've mentioned in previous videos. NDAA was the National Defence Authorization Act, and it was an act which was introduced at the end of 2011, which puts American citizens and other citizens in the world in danger of being thrown in jail without trial, without due process. Just in case the NDAA Act didn't apply to American citizens, the American government introduced another act, a sort of belts and braces approach, and the act was called the Enemy Expatriation Act, and that would strip American citizens of their citizenship, after which the NDAA Act could apply. It seems as though the NDAA Act did apply to American citizens, but this was just an extra, an added extra to make absolutely sure. And in exactly the same way, it seems as though they've introduced two acts at the same time, a sort of two-pronged approach, a lot of legislation for legislators to scrutinise as well, and this seems to be their approach. I understand that PIPA is a lot less severe than SOPA, so I'm mainly going to concentrate on SOPA today. There is another comparison too with NDAA, and that is that Obama first said that he was not willing to sign NDAA, and then he signed it in the last hours of 2011 when everybody was partying. And as Alex Jones very eloquently put it, evil deeds are done in the dark. So in exactly the same way, Obama has said he will not sign this act. But can we believe him, since he didn't tell the truth the last time? Now, I have to say that I find it incredible that I have to concern myself about what's happening in the US. I've got nothing against American citizens who seem really nice, but why should I be affected by legislators in the US when I don't vote for them? Well, the reason is that the UK government is America's poodle. Sorry, Max, you're far better than David Cameron. SOPA is about copyright and trademarks. Trademarks are company logos like this, or this, or this. A company can register its trademark and then stop any other company using a similar trademark if there is a, quote, significant risk of confusion. This significant risk of confusion is now being interpreted as meaning any similarity whatsoever. If you want to start a company in a given field, like publishing for example, and even 2 or 3 letters of your company name resemble another company name in the same field, you risk shelling out £400 to £500 to try to register with no certainty of success, And if you don't register, you risk spending a fortune on trying to establish a brand, only to find you have to change the brand identity later. This stifles entrepreneurship and it destroys innovation. I looked into what would happen if you tried to register a company as Grot. Some may remember the TV series on Reginald Perrin, who staged a suicide in order to escape his soul-destroying job. When he returned to his family, he formed a company called Grot, which sold products advertised as rubbish, stuff nobody else would want to buy. It was hilarious. But in view of this TV series, no one would want to call their company Grot, surely. So just to check this, I typed Grot into the search page of the UK Trademarks and Patents Office. And hey presto, 3 pages, 12 results for Grot. Seriously though, all this adds to the difficulties of starting a business, and it's all to protect the big corporations. So what about copyright? If you produce a book, a newspaper article, a drawing, a photo, a film, a piece of music, if you perform a piece of music, your performance is copyrighted. Even if you write a piece of software, your endeavours are automatically copyrighted. Presumably, if you write a virus, that too is copyrighted because that's a piece of software. You don't have to apply, as you do with trademarks, if you can prove the copyright belongs to you. So what's the argument used by the big corporations? The big corporations will say that they shell out millions on movies, lots of jobs depend on this, and people downloading movies free are stealing intellectual property. Now, I'm not going to argue that creative people should not receive rewards for their creative endeavours. I think they deserve to be richly rewarded, but often that doesn't happen anyway. The Beatles were originally tricked into losing the copyright on their songs, and big business benefited. It's usually the corporations who are after continual rapid growth who want to milk any creative work for everything it's worth. They are often ultra greedy vampires on the creative artists who deserve rewards. Who downloads movies and softwares free of charge anyway? Who are the pirates and what's their point of view? The pirates, I believe, are mainly kids, students who don't have the excessive sums demanded by the big corporations. For example, students who need a piece of software for their training and who can't afford £200 to £300, so they get tempted and download from companies like BitTorrent and Pirate Bay. I think if the companies charged a reasonable sum for a piece of software, the pirates would probably buy their software anyway. So what's our side of the story? The non-pirates who will suffer from this legislation? Well, let me say first of all that lifetime plus 70 years is a ridiculous period for copyright. It doesn't benefit the creative artist, doesn't benefit the spouse of the creative artist, and it means that wonderful works of art and literature are left languishing on shelves because they are still not in the public domain. Copyright has been extended and extended until soon nothing will be in the public domain. Why is it that a patent only lasts for 20 years? Because corporations want it that way, that's why. But there's more. I recently listened to a video which provided evidence that the very corporations who are now objecting to SOPA actually promoted file-sharing sites like BitTorrent and Pirate Bay. They actually made money out of encouraging kids to download movies, etc., without paying. Even Microsoft was apparently involved. I've left a link to this video below. Why would they do that, you might ask? And it's a good question. Well, the only reason I can think of is that they planned all along to introduce SOPA to get rid of all competition and to get rid of freedom of speech. Conspiracy theories, I hear you say. But then you tell me why big corporations, media corporations, would use inducement and entrapment to lure young kids into downloading pirated materials, then lobby to have legislation introduced to stop them. So what are the provisions of SOPA and how will it affect us? The Act is incredibly vague, which means it can apply to all sorts of situations. There's a provision to target domain names which infringe copyright, but that won't affect the pirates because they will be motivated simply to type in an IP address, which is just a number showing how the computer recognizes the domain name. So they will continue to pirate movies, etc., and the big corporations will eventually be able to charge them for it because, as we've just learned, the corporations set up the file-sharing software in the first place, and therefore they control it. Only the little people, the non-pirates, will be affected. Another provision of the Act is that companies will be able to accuse competitors of infringing copyright or trademarks, and simply by doing this they will be able to take down competitors' sites. Who will suffer as a result of this? The little people, the non-pirates, small business owners, will be destroyed by big corporations because there will be no recourse to law, no due process, even if the small businesses could afford it. But the most significant provision of the Act is the one which puts the onus on ISPs, Internet Service Providers, to police their sites and ensure there is no copyright infringement. This will completely change the face of the Internet. The Internet is based on connectivity, links from one site to another, and this will have to end because ISPs won't take the risk of allowing comments from users, and they won't be able to link to other sites either. This will affect the Internet in much the same way as draconian defamation law affected freedom of speech and the media in the UK. Defamation law in the UK puts the onus on newspapers to ensure the accuracy of anything they report anybody saying. The newspaper is an intermediary, just like the Internet. The onus of proof is on the newspaper to prove that what it has reported is accurate, not on the plaintiff to prove it was inaccurate. The result has been the destruction of freedom of speech. And remember, we have no First Amendment rights in the UK. So that's why British people never talk about politics and don't have opinions on anything. Have you ever read in a newspaper words such as this? There is no suggestion that Tony Blair did anything wrong. What this actually means is we don't want to be sued for defamation, so we're going to have to say this. So sites like Infowars.com will have to close down or think of a way around the law. YouTube will not be able to operate either. But the corporations will say that's perfectly fair. It's not right that Alex Jones should put a link to a Daily Mail page if he's going to benefit from this, the Daily Mail would say. Well, I say that big corporations often benefit from finances supplied by others too. It's called market failure in economics. I'll give you an example. Microsoft and others benefit enormously from taxpayers in the UK and other countries too. Imagine how much it would cost Microsoft to pay for people to train customers how to use their software. Microsoft enjoy the benefits of UK teachers financed by the taxpayer on a daily basis, teaching kids to use Microsoft software. So when these kids leave school, Microsoft has large numbers of ready-made customers, courtesy of the British taxpayer. And I don't know of any financial concessions which Microsoft make to UK schools or to its teachers. But of course, we don't hear these arguments because people like me can't hire a lobbyist. What will it mean for people like me? So far, I've been relying on the Fair Use Clause, which allows you to use short clips from videos, photos, etc., providing you're not using them for commercial use, but for education and information. I don't make money out of my videos. I haven't even signed up for adverts. I do the videos because I think somebody has to speak out. I think we live in a remix society now. With the tools available, you can do a pick and mix of existing creative works
and produce new creative works. My video "Sheeple in Charge of the Remote" is an example. I would have acknowledged the creator of the picture I used if I knew who created it. I did the animation of the sheep, and I also animated the set, so that was the part I created. I would guess that the person who drew the sheep would have the same views as me and wouldn't object to it being used. I really don't see either why Paul McCartney would object to me playing a short clip of "Here Comes the Sun" when I let my chickens out. You can see that in my video at Chicken's Day. There is an argument too that using short clips of songs in videos actually promotes the songs. YouTube seems to recognise this, and it has software that identifies music and puts ads automatically which link people to the purchase of the music. But YouTube will have to be shut down if this act is passed, and I for one will be really sorry. I will miss all the videos which I can access if I want to find out how to do something, from pruning tomatoes to learning how to use a new piece of software. The entertainment beats TV any day. I remember pulling up a video to teach myself how to use an obscure piece of software. There was a young kid with non-existent teaching skills mumbling into a microphone and demonstrating the software so badly that I had no idea what he was saying. The entertainment peaked when his mother started banging on the door demanding he come for dinner immediately. That's what I love about YouTube, its lack of sophistication in an age of excessive sophistication. But more than that, I love the fact that I can find out the truth about what's happening in the news by listening to ordinary people like myself. I love the Hitler videos. There's one for every controversial topic, and the copyright holders of the original film seem to have given up objecting. There's a brilliant Hitler video on SOPA. I've left a link underneath. But the most serious implication of this SOPA legislation is that we will no longer be able to scrutinise our politicians. Freedom of speech will go, and I think that's what it's all about. Let's take an example. After the 7/7 bombings in Britain, CCTV footage was released of the 4 bombers in London. The footage was shown in all the major newspapers. I might want to comment on the footage and ask questions. I'm not a graphics expert, but anybody who's used Photoshop can see that this photo appears to have been tampered with. The bomber next to the railings appears to have a bar going through his face. And if you look carefully, one part of the railings is in front of the bomber and one part of the rail is behind. If I had to hazard a guess, I would say that the original picture had someone else standing in front of the railings. I would say that this person was erased and one of the bombers was put there instead. But because the rails had been erased along with the person who was originally there, the clone tool in Photoshop was used to reconstruct the rails, and this was of course done badly and carelessly. Also, the legs appear to have been cut and pasted from another figure. Look at the bit missing. There's a triangular bit which you can see pointed at by the arrow, and that is a little bit of missing body. Probably the picture of the bomber inserted into the picture was sitting down, so they could only use the top half. Now, all of this is conjecture and speculation, but the anomalies in the photo are fact. I don't have an explanation, and I don't know whether the government doctored the photo or the newspaper. But I do know questions need to be asked. The point is that I couldn't paste this photo if SOPA was passed, and so questions could never be asked. Of course, the big media moguls like Rupert Murdoch are supporting SOPA. They would. They probably think we'll go back to watching the tell-lie vision when YouTube and other alternative media sites close down. Well, Mr. Murdoch, we won't. You're an old dinosaur and you don't understand your audience. We're fed up listening to what we see as propaganda. And all that's going to happen is the alternative media will regroup and find another solution. All you analog radio buffs, we may need you. The internet kill switch that Obama has been testing depends on digital technology. I think I'm right in saying that the old-fashioned analog radio can't be switched off, but I for one hope that we keep the internet. Years, remember. So what are PIPA and SOPA? Well, PIPA stands for the Protect IP Act and SOPA stands for Stop Online Piracy Act. It's quite interesting that they have introduced a kind of two-pronged attack, which reminds me very much of what happened with the NDAA Act, which I've mentioned in previous videos. NDAA was the National Defence Authorization Act.
Dites-moi au nom quel pays effleura la belle romaine, Archipia d'Anetaï, qui fut sa cousine germaine, et que par l'encombriant mène de sur rivière ou sur étang, qui beauté trop plus qu'humaine, mais où sont les neiges d'antan, qui beauté trop plus qu'humaine.
And it was an act which was introduced at the end of 2011, which puts American citizens and other citizens in the world in danger of being thrown in jail without trial, without due process. Just in case the NDAA Act didn't apply to American citizens, the American government introduced another act, a sort of belts and braces approach, and the act was called the
Mais où sont les neiges d'antan?
Sorry to inflict that on you, YouTube, but you can't imagine how difficult it is to find anything not in copyright to use as a short introduction to a video. In the end, I decided that I could use a piece of music with lyrics by a 13th century French poet called François Villon. 13th century should be out of copyright. Of course, the song was well known because Georges Brassens sang it, but he's got performance rights. Then I realised that although the lyrics were out of copyright and the performance copyright was mine, yes, I can proudly claim copyright on that brilliant performance, the music itself was written in the 60s, and even if the writer died there and then in the 60s, it will still be in copyright, lifetime plus 70 years.